Workloads protected by VMware are the safest workloads in the multi-cloud. Private cloud, public cloud, any cloud. Stronger, with distributed protection to the API and everything east-west, inside, and cross-cloud. Stronger, with 3 layers of detection, trusting nothing and seeing everything, even the best hidden bad actors. Stronger, with an SE Labs AAA certified advanced NDR that brings the multi-cloud together for the win. You've got workloads, we've got security. VMware Security. Simply stronger. Visit securityweekly.com/VMware to learn more. Attackers are only getting more proficient, so how can you proactively adapt your cybersecurity strategy? Core Security by Help Systems helps you uncover and prioritize the risks that pose the biggest threat to your organization. Core Impact is a penetration testing tool that safely finds and exploits vulnerabilities using the same techniques as attackers. You can conduct advanced pen tests with ease using certified exploits and automations. Take your engagements to the next level by pairing with Cobalt Strike, a threat emulation tool ideal for adversary simulations and red team operations. Learn more at securityweekly.com/core security.
Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover in one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions monthly and we'll reach out to you once reviewed. All right, for today's second interview, we're going to cover an interesting topic, a topic that we're seeing a lot more of, continuous red teaming. So the idea that point-in-time pen testing might not be as valuable. What if we could do it all the time, year-round? And we're excited to have Bikash Barai, co-founder and CEO at FireCompass, with us today. Bikash is the co-founder, as I mentioned, and FireCompass is a SaaS platform for automated red teaming. I think a lot of us know the space as BAS, breach and attack simulation. He's a serial cybersecurity entrepreneur with several past exits, and we're excited to have him on the show today. Welcome, Bikash.
Thank you, Adrian. Super excited as well.
Yeah. So I think we're going to do a first on the show today. We're going to have a first here. I understand you haven't always been in security. It's always interesting to talk to folks about their careers or their lives before security, because in security we see people from all kinds of backgrounds. Everything from artists to professionals in completely different careers, maybe engineering, something like that. Yours is pretty unique, though. Can you tell us a bit about what you did before security?
Yeah, so in a way it's unique, in a way it's not. So my formal background had been computer science. I did 2 double BTech, one in computer science, one in architecture, but I was extremely passionate about magic, and that had a kind of a way which got me gradually into cybersecurity as well. So I used to do the kind of magic show which you see folks like David Blaine doing, more of like mental magic and stuff like that. And I was doing it in a kind of semi-professional level. I used to go and do these shows at various places. And interestingly, the closest thing to magic which I could find in computer science was hacking. And I got kind of introduced to hacking through one of my friends. And I found it like pure magic. And there are so many different similarities between magic and hacking that it's unimaginable. You can just pick up the algorithms of magic, write it down in a slightly different way, and it would look like, here's like spoofing, here's this social engineering and stuff like that. So my kind of entry into cybersecurity was more through magic.
Well, and security is kind of magic to a lot of people, right? Like that was part of my attraction to it, is like I'm attracted to anything I don't understand. That's just completely, unknown to me, and that's how I got into security also. But though I didn't do any magic. But
by the way, on the magic front, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand. You were going to do a little bit of magic for us today?
Let me tell you a magic story, rather than showing some magic.
Okay.
So this was something very interesting. we started our first venture during those days, and I had to go and travel across Europe, etc., for business meetings. So during those days, I was fairly into magic, and I had been pretty good in terms of knowing all the magic tricks, because I also loved studying, so kind of read everything and also practiced it enough to a good degree. Now that background setting is important, and I'll tell you the reason later. So I went to Paris, and in the metro, that day it was slightly raining. It was drizzling, so I kind of walked like fast down the metro, and I just paused because I was walking fast for quite some time. Once I got into the underground metro station, and a guy came to me, and this guy came and told me that I got this iPhone, and iPhone just got released at that point in time, and I would like to sell this. Would you like to buy? And during those days, I was the BlackBerry guy, and I said, you know what, I use BlackBerry. I wouldn't buy an iPhone. So he continuously kind of pestered me, and he wanted to come and sell this. And he said, you know what, I got this iPhone, which I would give it to you at a very low price, and some €100 or something like that. And I told him, no, I'm not interested. And he eventually kind of came down and said, if you give me like $15 and I badly need this money, I'm going to give you this iPhone and also a camera. Two things together. It was one of those just click and shoot camera. And I eventually kind of got greedy, and I said, okay. So what he did was he took this iPhone and the camera, put it in a brown bag, and gave it to me. And after he gave it to me, I gave him this $15. And this guy then, I got my kid over here who wants to say hello. And then after that, he just ran away. And once I took that packet and opened it, I found out that there were 2 potatoes. Wow. He right in front of me did the switching, and I bought the most expensive kind of pair of potatoes in my life.
Wow. So that's I don't know that we call that magic. Like we have a different, there's like a legal term for that. That's not magic, right?
Yeah, but he did magic in front of me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an interesting point. You know, I love that you describe that as magic, you know, because that you know, having been a pen tester in the past, you know, that's part of what you're doing with social engineering. You know, it's a great example of, you know, pretexting and phishing and things like that. You know, the goal is similar. And also in security in general, like I remember every time in my security career, I felt fairly comfortable that I knew a lot of stuff. You know, I remember the first time I went to a big conference. You know, I think DEF CON was really my first big security conference, and immediately realized how far out of my depth, you know, and how little I knew when I showed up there. So, you know, I love that. You know, especially today, and you know, more well. It was easier to travel, you know, but, you know, with access, at least over the internet, you know, to a lot more people in the world, you can very quickly learn how little you know, and learn a lot more from different people. So for you, you had to travel to France to do that. And yeah, I guess.
Interestingly, knowing is not enough. This is one thing which I kind of learned the hard way. Knowledge is not enough.
Yeah, I totally thought this was going to go in a different direction, you know, because I'm sure there are people doing, you know, magic tricks and stuff like that in tube stations and things like that in France. So I thought it was going to be something like that. I thought it was going to be a street musician or magician.
So getting fooled despite knowing all the tricks. Huh?
Yeah, and maybe that's part of what he does. Maybe he's also a street magician and just learned a different way to use those skills. Wow, if it seems too good to be true, Huh?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
In that case.
So speaking of knowledge, and I wanted to kind of jump into talking about cybersecurity habits. I know before 2021 ended, I put together an editorial piece on scmagazine.com, kind of talking about. I don't like to do predictions. I like to throw out my hopes, and one of my hopes is that people would practice security more. Every time we look at the results of a breach, how a breach happened in a company, almost always the failures aren't, oh, we didn't have enough XDR, or we didn't have enough next gen AV or something like that. Like, they owned all the things that they needed. Processes tended to fail. A lot of companies don't really practice for those scenarios, for a scenario in which they get breached, so they're really not prepared for it. So I've been likening cybersecurity to exercise, or to even to sports. Like, the more you practice it, the better you're going to be at it. And for example, PCI DSS requires one incident response test per year. You're not going to be very good at incident response if you test it once a year.
Absolutely. And in fact, interestingly, one of my hobby research area had been habits and cybersecurity. And I did, I think, 3-4 talks at RSA conference on this. This is not what we do for my usual part of normal work. I mean, my normal focus area is automated red teaming, etc. But this had been one of those like cool side hobby projects which I worked on. And this was something very, very interesting, which I kind of stumbled upon, the science of habits. And very interestingly, let me tell you an interesting story. I mean, this time it's not me, not about me. So there's this guy called Eugene Pauli, and Eugene had viral encephalitis, and the good part of his brain was completely damaged. And as a result, he could not store any new memory. So if you go and meet him, he would say, "Hi, I'm Eugene." You say, "Hi, I'm Adrian," and then the next moment he would forget that you guys introduced, and he would go and say, "Hi, I'm Eugene" once more. And so he couldn't store any new memories, but the old and past memories were still there, so he could function as a part of his like normal life, but he couldn't store any new memory. So Eugene and his wife, they moved to a new neighborhood, and that's something which he was absolutely unaware of, that place. So every morning, both Eugene and his wife, they used to go out for a walk, and they used to come back. And obviously he had to go with his wife because otherwise he wouldn't remember his way back. So one day, his wife got ready, came, and she expected Eugene to be waiting for going out for the walk. But all of a sudden, she noticed that Eugene wasn't there. And she searched the whole house. She went and searched the neighborhood. She couldn't find this guy anywhere. And she got extremely she got extremely afraid, like, where is he? Because he wouldn't be able to come back home if he is outside. And after running around in the neighborhood, she eventually came back, and she thought, let me go and call the police. And at that moment, he noticed that Eugene was sitting at the living room. And she asked, like, where have you been? And he said, I don't remember. And then she noticed that Eugene had collected some pine cones, and his hands were filled up with sap and dirt. And she knew that he went and collected it from a part of the neighborhood. So she got amazed that how could Eugene go out and find the way back home, because of his like brain getting damaged. He was not supposed to remember anything. So she informed the doctors, and I think there were some prominent doctors from University of California, San Diego. They were kind of looking at Eugene's case, because that was a very unique case at that point in time. And what they amazingly discovered was that if you go and ask Eugene, that, Eugene, can you tell where is the refrigerator? He wouldn't be able to tell you that there's the refrigerator or what's the map of the house, how to go and find the refrigerator. But if he felt hungry, he could just go and automatically reach out to the refrigerator and get the food and come back. So they got amazed that how could somebody kind of remember things when his brain wasn't remembering anything. So that was something very interesting at that point in time in the medical world. And eventually what they discovered was that there is another part of the brain called the basal ganglia, where which is not the part of the prefrontal cortex. So it's not part of the conscious memory, but it is more like that subconscious, unconscious part of our memory or the brain, which makes us do things where we don't even know what we are doing. So you may call that in certain ways habits or whatever it is. So I don't know if this happened to you, Adrian. Did it happen to you that you are in an elevator in the wrong floor, you're thinking of something and the door opens and you get off at the wrong floor? Did it happen to you?
Oh yeah. No, I'm very.
So your basal ganglia is working. Congratulations.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I have. It happens to me more often in the car. Actually, it's much worse with my dad. We're both ADHD, so we can easily lose focus and get distracted. And if we're not actively thinking about, okay, this is where we're going, that habit will totally lead us to some place that we've driven to a lot of times, and we'll miss turns, exits, stuff like that. So like if I'm deep into a conversation with a passenger in the car and no longer actively thinking about where I'm driving, like we you call it autopilot. You go on autopilot, right?
Yeah. So that's the autopilot, and all these autopilot mechanisms are stored in the basal ganglia. So it is kind of stored in form of trigger, routine, and reward. So if there is a trigger, and if there's enough number of times you did something, the routine kind of gets stored and you automatically do that. And that is something which is being used by a lot of organizations like Coke. I mean, Coke got this happiness campaign, right? Like they do all these ads which associates things with happiness, and so that every time you feel happy, they want to kind of encode this in your basal ganglia. If you feel happy, you should have a Coca-Cola, right? So during a movie, during a happy moment, you will see a Coke kind of truck passes by and stuff like that. But the alcohol companies kind of go one step further. Whether you are happy or sad or bored, there's always an alcohol for that moment.
Right. So, yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah. Alcohol is for all emotions, right? Celebrating, trying to forget.
And I think we need a similar approach in cybersecurity as well. So we are right now trying to kind of address things through awareness. We go and tell, don't write down the password, have this difficult password and stuff like that. Instead of that, we need to think like what Coca-Cola is doing or these alcohol companies are doing. You need to kind of encode this as a habit in the people. Like we all know having fries is bad, going to the gym is good, but we don't always do that, right? So knowledge doesn't make changes. Right. So if we really want a secure organization, if we really want a secure world or the people to be secure, we need to see how do we kind of drive those habits. And we need to think in terms of like how can we make people practice enough so that the trigger, routine, and reward gets stored. So my research had been primarily around that. As I mentioned, is a hobby research. My usual research is like automated red teaming and that area. We'll get to that. And this is one very interesting area which I think we as a cybersecurity fraternity, as a ecosystem, we should think of. We shouldn't expect like all the folks in the organizations to just go ahead and do the right things, because we are like the slave of our habits. So we need to think like how do we go and change habits for people rather than just making them aware.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Have you ever read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear?
Not that one, but there's another book on habit which I read, which was a great book. But the Atomic Habits, I heard about it quite a few times, and I'd love to read it sometime.
Yeah, I haven't read it either, but I hear it's really good, and I bought a copy. I just haven't read it yet. I do get his. He sends out like a daily email, daily newsletter, and this is kind of a trend that I've noticed in general with security, where we like to think that all our problems and challenges are somehow unique to cybersecurity. And some of them are, sure, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are just, basic things that other industries have figured out. If you look at other, like, engineering organizations, they figured all this stuff out long ago, and we can we can adopt a lot of what they do. A lot of what makes them, especially industries where safety is a concern. There's a lot of stuff that we figured out there that I think cybersecurity organizations that want to get better at security can take and learn from. But
I think we should steal more, huh? We should steal more from other fields.
I mean, it's not stealing. It's just I think it's kind of common sense to to reach out and see if other people have had the same problems and look for advice from other people. And like when a lot of people mention diversity, the need for diversity in InfoSec, I think this is an aspect of it, is that we don't necessarily want InfoSec full of people with cybersecurity degrees and backgrounds in security. We would benefit from pulling people from other industries and other backgrounds into cybersecurity, because a lot of them, once they come into our field, they see the problems we're dealing with, and they're like, yeah, I know exactly how to solve that. We solved that over in biochemistry or some other field that they come from. They recognize them.
Absolutely.
Let's pivot into talking about automated red teaming. And I think first maybe discuss a bit about why somebody would want to do that and what that means, being continuous with red teaming.
Yeah. So Adrian, that's a very interesting question. So I love looking into like trends, what the future could be, not the current trends, what could be the future like. So I'm very curious about it. So when I looked into cybersecurity as a field, one thing which I absolutely believe is that things have to become continuous. There's no other way. There are quite a few kind of those futuristic trends which we can't avoid, which will be there. One definitely would be like moving to both detection and response together. Response wasn't such a big thing a few years back, but now it is, like the XDR movement. That's one movement. Consolidation of cybersecurity, that's another big movement. So another big movement which I believe is things getting continuous. And if you look at zero trust has become very hot today. But if you dive a little bit deeper, in a way, a better name could have been, to explain, and zero trust definitely sounds very cool, would be continuous trust evaluation. It is not zero trust. If you look at it technically, you're not saying that you don't want to trust at all. So at that moment, you are definitely trusting. But the key thing is that trust is evaluated moment to moment. So it's not about trust being something which you assign once and forget, but you are continuously evaluating trust. So I look at zero trust also as a kind of movement in that direction of moving to continuous. And the same thing, I believe, has to happen in the world of red teaming or penetration testing, whatever you might call. And the reason being very simple. Like, there are a couple of major drivers or major challenges which we noticed when we were thinking what's next. After my previous company got acquired, we were thinking what's next. So a couple of very interesting challenges which we noticed. One was that organizations don't know of all the assets they have. And that's causing a lot of these breaches, because marketing goes and creates something which security team doesn't know, or the DevOps guys does something without their knowledge. And these are not part of the management program. So that's one, unknown assets. And along with that, there's a second very big challenge which I noticed was that if you think of red teaming, even today, organizations conduct red teaming maybe once a year, a few times a year. Most of the organizations don't even do red teaming. So we are red teaming, our pen testing is also a few times a year. So we are testing as an industry, we are testing some of the assets some of the time, whereas the bad guys, the attackers, they are attacking all of the assets all of the time. Today, the ransomware folks, the bad actors, threat actors, they're all kind of relying heavily on automation. So they are attacking on a continuous basis on everything, whereas we only test partial set of assets a few times a year. So that has to change. If we as an industry have to be secure, we must be at par, if not ahead of the hackers. And for that, we must discover all our assets continuously. We must test all these assets continuously. So whether you call that red teaming or penetration testing, that name doesn't matter. But this is something which I believe has to happen. And very interestingly, in the industry, a drive towards that is happening. I mean, and there obviously a few companies working on this today. We are one such company where people are trying to go and do this continuous discovery or reconnaissance of the assets, then go and pick up these playbooks of these various attackers or your threat actors. And based on that, like the objective-based red teaming, which we would typically do, convert that into automation, convert that into playbooks, so that now you can run it on a regular basis, so that now you can run it on a continuous basis. So this is something which I absolutely believe has to happen in the future. Security has to become continuous. Pen testing and red teaming also has to become continuous.
Yeah, something that struck me, especially back when I was a pen tester, is if your pen testing company, or even if you have internal pen testing resources, are successful every time, which they tend to be, for a lot of clients, for a lot of companies. If they're finding stuff you've missed all the time, getting past your defenses without anybody noticing, they kind of become, it's easy for them to become part of your vulnerability management program. You depend on them. You depend on the service, on the red teaming or pen testing, to let you know about things that you've missed. And if that's the case, and if that's happening over and over and over, it's kind of crazy to only do it once a year or twice a year, because who's finding that stuff you're missing when they're not there, when they're not around? So it's only logical to say, okay, well, obviously we've got a gap here. We're missing stuff on a regular basis, and I think that's a bigger problem. The root cause behind why the pen testers are always succeeding, and you're apparently not learning from the lessons that you should be learning from after they come through. But at least in the meantime, you need some way to do that continuously, so that you're not always vulnerable.
Yeah. So Adrian, another thing which I think we as an industry have to tackle is that it has to be continuous, but at the same time, if it is continuous, it's just going to shower us with so many issues, right? And that's a challenge which we as an industry are facing, that just abundance of issues to fix, right? We don't want more issues to coming up there. So I think testing has to become continuous, but at the same time, we need a way to figure out how to do better prioritization, so that we don't go and try to fix everything. So I think any security organization, they have got this challenge, right? I mean, I am not able to fix only that one red team or pen test issues which we discovered. Even if I do continuous, what would happen to me? It's rather better I put my head into the sand, because I'll not be able to fix it in any case. So I think that's another challenge we need to solve. We are trying to address that by kind of doing attacker-centric prioritization using these TTPs and the playbooks, which can tell you, what, there are thousands of issues out there, but these are the 10 most important things you need to focus on right now. So that is a major challenge which we as an industry need to solve. It's not yet solved, and that's the reason why we all are suffering, but we got to solve that.
Yeah. No, I followed the breach and attack simulation space back when I was at 451 Research, when it was still a fairly new field. And I remember some of the early products I looked at. When you logged in, the first thing you saw on the dashboard was there are 1.2 million ways you can be breached. Like that's the number up in the dashboard, and it's just immediately demoralizing. I'm like, what do I do with 1.2 million of anything? Okay, I'm going to log out, quit, and go home, right? That's right.
So this prioritization is a very interesting challenge. And I remember there are a lot of interesting research that has been done. So the key idea is like, can I remove just one or two issues which can have a cascading impact, and
Yeah.
like hundreds of other issues can become redundant, or even if it is there, it's not going to pose as a threat. So that's the kind of approach which we need to take to solve this as a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've seen that trend on the vulnerability management side with the vendors that will take all your vulnerability management output, deduplicate it, and try and determine, what single actions you can take will have the biggest impact on your risk score. And in the vulnerability management space, it's almost always Microsoft Office or something like that, some big software package that's on all workstations that attackers regularly take advantage of. But for a BAS product, I imagine it would be. Are there things in your experience, that always kind of float up to the top, regardless of who the customer is, when you do that prioritization?
So there are a lot of very interesting things. So this continuous automated red teaming is emerging as a slightly different field compared to BAS. So BAS guys sit inside the organization. They have the agents. They try to simulate these various attack paths and find out the risk, right? Whereas this new autonomous red teaming market, which is emerging, Gartner calls it autonomous red teaming, is more like from outside in. You do the reconnaissance, try to break in, and then do the lateral movement, etc. But it's more of an outside in approach. It's not a simulation, it's real attack. Now my experience is more from this perspective and not the BAS. Because I did not work on BAS, or we as a company don't work on that. So when we do this outside in kind of red teaming approach, few things which we commonly see, which kind of works works for us, but doesn't work for the customer, because they don't want us or any adversarial solution to work, right? So a few common things would be, one is like these open RDP ports or some other application which is out there open, or some database server, etc. And the password sometimes is like admin. I know this is very simple, it doesn't sound very exciting, but we do see a lot of such things, like some asset which is probably not one of those topmost critical assets, and it has got a very weak password. And it's quite common that we see those things, or for the RDP ports, similar stuff. So that's one kind of common things which we see. Another kind of common thing which we see is these pre-production systems. So these are generally very vulnerable. Those are not tested, and a lot of times pre-prod systems has got this production data. So you can basically figure out a way to enter through that and do lateral movement. So that's one common thing which we notice. Social engineering attacks is something which we even now see that works in most of the cases. Like you will always find out somebody who would at some point in time just get compromised. So that's another. The third-party tools. This is another very interesting thing which we are seeing in recent times. Like, for example, vulnerabilities in patch management software, vulnerability in the IT, these management platforms, etc. So these are the third-party
that's
tools.
The worst. Yeah, that's the worst place to have a vulnerability, because it has to have basically admin access to everything, right? So it can update software.
And we see, like, you just get one such system which has got a unpatched vulnerability, and then through that break into all the systems within the organization which are part of that patch management. So there are a lot of those interesting things which we see typically, which leads us into the organization. But what is more important is whether we are able to break in or not. I think what the security folks are looking for is getting that assurance. Are my security controls working? Today there is this new threat out there. Log4j is out there. Like, am I exposed to that? How many, what kind of exposure do I have? So having this kind of attack strategies automated, so that you can do this on a regular basis, so that you can have that peace of mind when you go to sleep, that that check has happened and I'm safe. So that's the other part, which is I guess very, very important.
Yeah, and that's a good. I'm glad you corrected me on that. I was thinking of what you did as breach and attack simulation, but right, that sounds very different from what you're doing. That's more of a most of them have agents and Python payloads, and they're just testing point A to point B. If they're able to do certain things, if they get detected doing that. Whereas you're looking from the outside in, correct?
That's right.
That's what you said. Yeah.
Yes. And also look at the control effectiveness. A lot of times we see, like, when we do these testing from outside in, SOC doesn't catch us. They're ideally supposed to, but we have seen cases like that part of the log is not integrated. So
tell me about it. And I'm sure.
Do you have some stories around that?
Oh my goodness. So that was one of the biggest things that annoyed me coming out of SolarWinds, where all the vendors saying, "Hey, we detected that." And from my perspective, it's not important at all that your product detected it. Like, if a human doesn't see it, forget it. Like it's easy to create a product that logs 100% of the things and creates, millions of alerts. But it's as useless as not doing anything, as not logging anything, if a human can't see it and doesn't see it in time and in the right context so that they understand it, and then they escalate and they do something about it. Like, that's the tough part, right? That prioritization, and then internally just having enough training that somebody knows what to do with that. And you get to that response piece. That response piece is really tough too. Like, you don't want to take down production servers if you don't really have to. Like, you want to be sure, we got to take this down because we think somebody's on that system, and we want to cut them off before they pivot.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So good distinction there. Yeah, I think we would you consider it attack surface management? That's kind of the label or the general bucket that we put that kind of thing in.
So Gartner is calling it autonomous red teaming. So I would like to kind of put it into that, but we also have a small overlap with external attack surface management. So I would say, as Fire Compass, we are into this autonomous red teaming space, but by the way, we also do the external attack surface management, because in order to do red teaming, you got to do the recon. So we have to do the recon, but our vision is more towards this autonomous red teaming. And Gartner has identified these two markets separately. So I guess they're seeing these two kind of markets emerging differently, but I'm sure there will be consolidation and all those things in the industry. But as of now, these are kind of pointed by Gartner as two different markets. And we focus on the red teaming aspect more, but we also, by the way, do the autonomous red teaming, or the external attack surface management, because we have to do recon for doing the red teaming.
Exactly. Okay. I'm glad we could clarify that before we wrapped up here. Bikash, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today.
Thank you. Thank you, Adrian, so much.
And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. We'll see you next week.